The clock struck midnight with a hollow echo that felt louder than it should have, and as fireworks burst somewhere far beyond the frost-fogged windows, Ethan Walker sat alone at his small kitchen table, staring at two mismatched cups he had set out of habit before remembering there was no one else coming, the new year arriving not with laughter or warmth but with the quiet ache of survival and the soft breathing of his sleeping daughter in the next room, and in that moment, with the city celebrating and the world turning its page, Ethan truly believed this year would begin exactly the way the last one had ended, alone, unseen, and holding himself together with nothing but stubborn love. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that show up when hope feels thin, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because stories like this are reminders that none of us are truly alone, even when it feels that way. Ethan had learned long ago how to live inside exhaustion, the kind that seeped into bones and made every small task feel heavy, and since his wife had passed 3 winters earlier after a sudden illness that drained their savings and broke something permanent inside him, his life had narrowed into a careful routine built around keeping 8-year-old Lily safe, fed, and smiling, even when his own heart felt hollow. He worked long hours as a systems analyst at a towering glass headquarters downtown, a job that sounded impressive to strangers but in reality barely covered rent, childcare, and the quiet debts that stacked up month after month, and though he was grateful to have employment at all, he existed mostly in the background, arriving early, leaving late, never complaining, never asking for favors, and never expecting to be noticed. His CEO, Margaret Hale, was a name spoken with awe and distance, a woman known for precision, power, and a calendar so full that people joked she scheduled breaths, and Ethan had only seen her a handful of times from afar, passing through hallways like a force of nature, untouchable and impossibly far removed from the life of a single dad counting coins before grocery shopping. New Year's Eve had been especially hard, not because of any single disaster, but because of the quiet accumulation of disappointments that had led to this moment, the sitter cancelling at the last minute, the cheap frozen dinner he tried to dress up as a celebration, the realization that Lily had pretended to fall asleep early so he wouldn't see the sadness on her face, and the unopened envelope on the counter reminding him that rent would be late again. Ethan sat there listening to distant cheers echo between buildings, feeling the weight of promises he had made to his daughter about better days, about someday having a bigger place, about maybe even smiling again, and he whispered silent apologies into the empty room, convincing himself that surviving was enough, that dreaming could wait. Just as the fireworks faded and the silence settled back in, there was a knock at the door, sharp and unexpected, slicing through the stillness so suddenly that Ethan froze, his first thought irrational and panicked, his second protective as he glanced toward Lily's room, wondering who would come at midnight on New Year's, wondering if something had gone wrong, if this was another bill, another problem, another reminder that life never paused to let him catch up. He moved carefully, heart pounding, each step heavy with uncertainty, and when he opened the door, the cold air rushed in along with a sight so unbelievable that his tired mind struggled to make sense of it, because standing there under the flickering hallway light was Margaret Hale herself, his CEO, dressed simply, her hair pulled back, her expression softer than he had ever seen it, holding a small paper bag in one hand and looking at him not as an employee, but as a person. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Margaret's own night had been unraveling in quiet ways, that after decades of chasing milestones and applause, she had driven home alone from a sterile corporate gala, sat in a house too large and too silent, and felt the sharp clarity that comes when success stops being enough. Earlier that week, She had accidentally overheard a hushed conversation between HR and a manager about an employee struggling after losing a spouse, about a little girl who stayed late in the office sometimes because childcare fell through, about a man who never complained and never took days off even when grief still clung to him like a shadow, and something about that story had lodged itself in Margaret's chest, refusing to be ignored. She had asked questions she normally wouldn't, reviewed files she usually delegated, and when she realized that employee was Ethan, the quiet man she passed every morning without a second glance, she felt a rare discomfort, the kind that comes from seeing a truth too late. Standing there in the hallway, time seemed suspended as Ethan tried to understand why the most powerful person in his professional world was at his door at the exact moment he had given up on the idea of being seen, and Margaret, sensing his shock, explained in a gentle, unhurried way that she had no agenda, no press, no assistants waiting outside, only a need to start her own year differently, to acknowledge a reality she had ignored for too long. She spoke about her father, about growing up watching him work himself into silence after her mother died, about how no one had knocked on his door when he needed it most, and how she had sworn she would never become someone too busy to notice pain, even though somehow she had. Inside the small apartment, the air was warm but worn, the furniture mismatched, the walls marked with Lily's drawings taped carefully in uneven rows. And as Margaret stepped inside, she didn't comment or judge, she simply took it in, the evidence of a life held together by effort and love rather than money. Ethan felt exposed in a way he hadn't felt since the hospital room years ago, but also strangely lighter, as if the act of being witnessed without pity loosened something tight in his chest. They sat at the table where the untouched cups still waited, and Margaret placed the paper bag down, explaining that it held 2 slices of cake from the gala she had left early, because no one should welcome a new year without something sweet, and for the first time that night, Ethan felt a small, unexpected warmth bloom behind his ribs. As the minutes passed, Margaret didn't offer charity or grand speeches, she offered understanding, acknowledging how hard it was to ask for help, how systems often failed the very people who held them up, and how leadership meant more than quarterly reports. She told Ethan that she had reviewed his work personally, that his quiet consistency had saved the company more than once, that he deserved stability, not just gratitude, and while she didn't promise miracles, she promised action, flexible hours, proper support, and a future where he wouldn't have to choose between being a good employee and a good father. Ethan listened, stunned, emotions colliding inside him, relief tangled with disbelief, hope pressing against fear, because when life has taken so much, even kindness can feel dangerous. When Lily padded sleepily into the room, rubbing her eyes, confused by unfamiliar energy, Margaret knelt to her level without hesitation, introducing herself simply and asking about the drawings on the wall, and as Lily shyly explained each one, Ethan watched something he hadn't seen in years, his daughter glowing with the simple joy of being heard. In that quiet exchange, something shifted permanently, not because problems vanished, but because the weight felt shared for the first time, because the future cracked open just enough to let light in. Margaret didn't stay long, understanding that real care respected boundaries, but before she left, she asked Ethan to promise something that surprised him. Not loyalty, not silence, but that if he ever felt like he was drowning again, he would speak up, because strength was not measured by how much pain one could hide. When the door closed behind her and the hallway returned to silence, Ethan stood there for a long moment, his hand still on the knob, the world outside unchanged, yet everything inside him different. In the days that followed, change came not as fireworks but as steady steps, adjusted schedules, a promotion long overdue, access to childcare support, and a sense that the company he served finally